Welcome to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. With your host, Mike Campbell. Case Autopsy is part of the family of podcasts brought to you by Lawyer Minds. In this podcast, we explore recent verdicts and settlements from around the country to try and distill down the best techniques for you to apply in your cases. Here's your host, Mike Campbell.
Welcome back to another episode of Case Autopsy. Today we're joined by returning champion, Tad Thomas.
Returning champion? I don't think so.
Returning champion. Trial lawyer extraordinaire.
Yeah.
100% success rate on pro hack motions.
Yes, I'm undefeated. Yeah. If that's the bar, then yes, I'm doing well.
We need to get you in here and talk about your trial last month.
Yeah, I don't think so. Let's wait and see how the punitive damages portion pans out before we talk about it.
So, I was leaving the other day, court, and the defense lawyer, it's a nursing home case, and the defense lawyer is like, man, we have such a great burden. He was talking about all the burdens that the defense lawyer had. And I said, let me just stop you for a second. If I win 3 out of 10 of these, I'm writing books.
Hall of Fame. Yeah.
And I said, so don't. And right. He was like, okay, yeah, you're right. So you got to play the law of averages, right?
That one was unique because it was the first time that I'd ever had a juror give me her phone number during my voir dire.
We have to have you on just to talk about everything that took place.
Yeah.
Leading up to the phone number being
the actual trial was a sideshow because of everything else that was going on outside of the trial. That week was a week and a half or whatever it was. Yeah, that's the story, not the actual case.
It's pretty great. The play-by-play was jaw-dropping, to say the least.
Very interesting.
Today we got a great trial lawyer on. He's friends with both of us, Render Freeman.
Yeah, one of the things I like about Render is, he's a teacher, and I'm an AAJ guy. One of the whole reasons AAJ was founded was lawyers helping other lawyers become better lawyers. And Render's, been teaching for AAJ for years and helping with depot colleges and trial colleges and stuff. So it's one of the great things about Render.
I would love to I don't know if I would ever get into a class since I teach at the depot college as well, but I would love to take a class with Render. He's that kind of guy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's go into his class now and listen to what he has to say. He got an outstanding verdict recently, and hopefully he'll share some good information and everybody learns from it.
You're listening to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. This is Mike Campbell.
Well, we're pleased to be joined today by the one and only Render Freeman, outstanding trial lawyer in Atlanta, Georgia, a good friend of both Tad and I, and just an all-around excellent human being. Render, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for the intro. That's very kind of you. I feel the same way.
Look, man, anyone who knows you, what was it? JD Hayes told me last year before you guys presented at the trial lawyers conference, or was it you that said you get in a rocket ship with that guy? I think JD said he'd get in a rocket ship with you and go to the moon any day of the week. That's how I feel. So.
Thank you, Mike. I feel the same way. JD's another fabulous human being that I'm glad that I have been exposed to.
Yeah. Well, and we're fortunate to have you on today to talk about some justice you got for some very deserving individuals. Could you tell us a little bit about the case, the background, and what led you to trial?
Sure. Outside of Atlanta, there's a 6,000-acre motocross facility for people who enjoy motocross riding and four-wheeling and razors, these side-by-side like dune buggy kind of things. And there's actually cabins out there as well. And there's a sporting clay facility. There's property that you can hunt on. So it's just an outdoor park for those kind of sports. It is owned and founded and run and invented by this guy, Mike McCommons, who came into the land somehow and decided that's what he wanted to do with it. He started it about 15 years ago, roughly. And when he set it up, he knew that he was going to have people that would get out there and get hurt and be stupid. And so he hired some lawyers to help him set it up in a way to protect the assets, put the land in a irrevocable trust, put all the equipment in a particular S corp, and then have the people that come in sign a waiver that says that you're not going to sue us for negligence, and this is inherently dangerous activity. And so he really wanted to create this kind of bubble for himself where he would be immune from liability for anything that might go on out there, which is fine, because these are dangerous things, and it's not fair to sue somebody when you take a known risk and that known risk materializes. Well, that's not even closely related to what happened in our situation. It was not an inherent risk. It was bizarre. And it involved Mike McCommons as the sole actor. He was the sole person who did anything that led to our client's death. Our client was Dr. Adam White. And Adam grew up in Washington State, always loved outdoors activities, came to dentistry school and orthodontic school in Georgia and settled in Georgia up in outside of Atlanta, really fancy neighborhood called Chateau Alon or Brazelton. And most of those guys up there on the weekends, they're playing golf, they're playing pickleball, they're playing tennis, maybe a little cornhole and a few beers. But Adam liked to motocross. He liked motocross riding and had no idea how to do it, but enlisted a young man whose father owned a shop and had him teach him and have him buy all the right equipment and be safe with it. And so Adam was a member out there at this facility outside of Atlanta that Mike McCommons had created called Durham Town. And he'd been riding for 7 or 8 years and had been in races and, it had some spills and some injuries, typical stuff. But one day he was out there on a Saturday afternoon, which is the busiest day of the week for the Durham Town and for the riders. And he was practicing. He had all of his safety gear on, boots, helmet, man, the stuff, you're like Boba Fett when you get on one of these motocross bikes. You are just like a knight in armor. And the typical stuff won't hurt you, falling or going over the handlebars. But that day, Mike McCommons, the owner, operator, and sole shareholder, member of the board of directors and officer of all these companies, decided it was a good idea to get on an excavator, a backhoe, one of these huge earth-moving pieces of equipment with tank tracks, and take it out on the track that was open and that Adam was riding on. And at one point, McCommons shoots across the track in this thing that goes about 2 miles an hour, gets across the track safely, but then starts riding alongside the track in this track hoe and gets stuck. And in trying to get himself unstuck, he's using that shovel that reaches out and claws earth back towards him. He's using that shovel to try to dig into the ground and pull the tractor off of this stump that it's stuck on. And in the meantime, what he does is he knocks a tree over and it falls directly across the track, and it falls with the worst possible timing and crushes Adam as Adam is going by on his motorcycle. No opportunity for Adam to do anything to react. It fell. We had a biomechanical expert reconstruct the whole thing. The bike was pristine. There was almost no damage to the bike. So that was a major issue in the case, was did Adam hit a tree or did a tree hit Adam? And we proved, and the jury agreed, that the tree fell directly in front of Adam as he's going by at about 40 miles an hour. And he strikes the tree with his face, and it shatters his skull, his cheekbones, his jaw, his cervical vertebrae. It tries to decapitate him. The helmet rips off because his head no longer has any structure to it to hold the helmet on. He's killed instantly. The tree continues to fall. the part that was right in front of his face is powdered by the impact. And then the part to his left continues to fall and strikes the handlebar downward. And that was the only damage to the bike, was that the left handlebar was bent down and there was some bark that was embedded in a downward fashion into the handlebar. And the bike kept going, and Adam went backwards off the bike, landed on his back, broke some of his ribs in the back, and was killed instantly. And McCommons denied the whole thing. He said the tree was already down. It had nothing to do with him being in the woods. It's just a big coincidence that his shovel was buried into the ground at the base of the tree that did fall and kill Adam. So there was a factual fight, and there was no video, no eyewitness testimony, only a denial from McCommons that that tree was already down when I got there. When I got there, I saw the bike laying down on the track, and I went out and tried to render aid. I called 911. I got on my radio. Adam was lying on the ground. The bike was over there, but it had nothing to do with me. And the authorities came out, thankfully. Paramedics got there. Adam was already gone. Sheriff's deputies came out with body cams on. And they're walking around investigating the scene. And we had the video for the jury of all of the body cam footage. And there's audio too. So you can hear things that Mike McCommons is saying. You can hear them brainstorming with each other about what they think happened. They walk over, they look at the track code, they look at the shovel, they look at the tree, and they take a bunch of pictures. And they concluded that McCommons knocked the tree over.
Really?
Yep. And they put that in their report. And there was a criminal investigation. A coroner came out to declare Adam dead. The coroner did his own investigation, took his own pictures, took his own measurements. He concluded that the tree fell onto Adam. And then because there was, I think there was a criminal investigation going on, they got the Georgia Bureau of Investigations involved, and the GBI did the autopsy on Adam. And the MD forensic pathologist concluded that based on the injuries, Adam was killed by a falling tree, not a fallen tree, but a falling tree. And our Coop Miners is his name, Dr. Coop Miners. He had been out of Daytona originally as a forensic pathologist down there. So he's seen all sorts of motorcycle crashes. He's a rider. So he kind of, if a death comes in that involves a motorcycle, he says, give me that one. That's sort of my subspecialty. So he testified at trial that there's only one way this could happen, and that would be the tree falling onto Adam. And then to just kind of put an exclamation point on it, we hired Kelly Kennett as a biomechanical engineer to go out there and map the scene, recreate the whole scene, and explain it from a biomechanical standpoint of how it all went down, including like the damage to the helmet, the damage to the chest guard or the lack thereof, the lack of damage to the bike, what the injuries would have been if Adam had struck a tree. Totally different injuries. Mm-hmm. You know, he'd have pelvic fractures and femur fractures and wrist fractures. And so totally different set of injuries. But so the jury agreed with us. It took them 2.5 hours to work all that out. And we had asked for significantly more money. In Georgia, the wrongful death claim is for the full value of the life of the deceased person from the perspective of the deceased person. So you're dead. What's your life worth to you?
Right.
You know,
right.
How did you
different than Missouri? Yeah. We have class claimants. You know, what is the value of the class claimants? What loss? You know, so
like the survivors, like what did Adam mean to his daughters and to his wife? Yep. Not in Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah. The widow gets to bring the claim, but it's not about her suffering. She has no claim for what she's been through. It's all kind of encapsulated into the value of Adam's life. And one of the things you can look at is his age, his life expectancy, how much money he was making and would have made over the course of his life. And he was an orthodontist. So he's making a good chunk of change. Right. He was young, he's 47. And so we had very high numbers on the economics, and we asked for additional money in terms of lost years of life. And they didn't give us very much of that. The jury just wanted to make sure that the daughters and the widow were okay. So they gave us He had $22 million roughly in lost future wages. So they gave us 100% of that.
Yeah, that is somewhat similar to how Missouri looks at it. The class claimant brings it, but you have family members who survived then, and who are those, and how do they? What is that first meeting like with them?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Adam's wife, Debbie, was our client. She was the one withstanding to bring the claim. He had an adopted daughter from Debbie's first marriage. And he had two daughters by Debbie, Victoria and Sarah Grace. Victoria at the time was 17. Sarah Grace was, 13. And, what just a awful time to lose a parent when you're, in high school or in middle school. And so it was, those are tough times already, middle school and high school with kids, but to lose your spouse at that phase of their life, I think was just incredibly difficult. So she had a lot of family. Her in-laws were helping her parents, moved into the area to help with the girls and to help with the crisis. I mean, Adam ran everything, marriages work out different kind of balances of, Laura and I call it, that's a blue job or a pink job. I'm trying to get her to, cut the grass. She's like, it's a blue job,
Sure.
And, and my marriage is very different. Thank God I have my wife because she runs the household and she's got her own career and works for Disney and all that. But man, I don't even know where the checkbook is. That's not the way it was for Debbie and Adam. Adam ran everything. So she's got to get up to speed on how to run their lives. So it was chaos when I first met them.
I mean, I can only imagine how frightening that must be for her to have lost that, not just from the aspect of the love and the companionship, but the fact that we lost my dad when I was young, and my mom didn't really do anything with the finances, and all of a sudden she's thrust into this picture. It's a frightening scenario.
Yeah. And it's just so many emotions.
Yeah.
You get, angry, you feel guilty that you don't know more, that you didn't help out more and are already familiar with this stuff. So, and then there's this helplessness of like, you were my partner. We were working together to try to figure out how to raise these girls. And now I'm alone and I've got to do it myself. And I need you, So it was obviously just a brutal period of time. And we got to trial like really quickly. He died in September of 2019. So we're only 2.5 years from his death. And so she's still really grappling with it. She's not, they've not attained any sort of equilibrium in their lives yet. They're still in crisis. And we put it to the jury that we really wanted them to give this family peace. That was sort of one of their primary missions, was to speak the truth. And the other one was to give this family some peace, because McCommons would not admit what he had done. He blamed it. They blamed it on Adam. They said he hit a fallen tree. It's his fault. I didn't have anything to do with it. And so, the ability to forgive and move on is really blocked when somebody is lying about what happened.
Absolutely. Yep.
Render, can you talk about collectability a little bit? Because you talked about how this guy had these trusts and he did everything he could to protect his assets in advance. So what are your next steps?
Well, we attacked that head on, Tad. One, he had signed this. Adam did sign a waiver, but in Georgia, those waivers are meaningless in the face of gross negligence or willful and wanton negligence. And I think one thing we learned in focus grouping is that regular people don't give a damn about those waivers. We sign those things every time we update our iPhone software. We don't know what's in there. We feel like we have to sign that stuff. But so we did prove gross negligence. They grappled with that. But we also, Tad, we named all of those entities. And we said a couple of things. We said as a primary that all of these entities were set up for the sole purpose of running a single joint enterprise, which is this motocross facility. That's the only thing they do. They don't have any other endeavors in their existence. And so it's a joint enterprise, and they're all responsible. And then, kind of as a belt and suspenders, we said, Mike McCommons is the agent of each one of those. When he's on that track hoe doing what he's doing, it's to the benefit of the joint enterprise. So they're all responsible on a respondeat superior level. And then, I don't know what you add after belt and suspenders, but we added a third thing. And we added that while the lawyers may have set this thing up correctly 15 years ago, no way this guy, McCommons, honored all of the rules associated with corporate form and corporate separateness. And so we had a great judge who ordered them to provide all the financials, tax returns, bank accounts. And we showed that they don't have any separateness. I mean, nobody out there that works there even knows about the various entities. They just say, oh, we work at Durham Town. And so we basically established also during the trial that he essentially walks around with 5 checkbooks in the glove box, and whichever one is on top is the one he grabs to pay the bill with. There were no payments to the trust that holds all the land. There were no leases for the use of that land. So we had them just kind of, we had this graphic where we had those separate boxes for those entities, but then based on the evidence, it all just melded into one big entity that he was working for that day. So we had a very simple verdict form. We just said, either you find in favor of the defendant or we find in favor of the plaintiff and against the following defendants, and you could check whatever boxes you wanted to check. They checked all the boxes, Mike McCommons and all of the entities and the trust, and then put $22 million for the money that should go to the family.
That's incredible. And I mean, I think about all of the little things that you did. First of all, getting the case to trial within 2.5 years, given these collectability issues, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to get those rulings from the judge, because that's a big hill to climb, man.
It was. And I have pled those kinds of allegations many a time. This is the first time I've ever tried those allegations and tried to prove them. And they're a little intimidating, Thankfully, we had all the sort of nitty gritty paperwork and tax returns. And we even had his personal tax returns showing that he basically has zero income because he just kind of gets it all through these entities. And I don't know how, but it was, but a shout out to my great friends, Mark Kozeratsky and Joel Smith, who I've done nursing home cases with. And Joel and Mark designed these allegations to deal with these nursing homes that try to, set up these webs so that you can't ever get to the assets of the mothership. And it's like one of those animals that'll chew off its leg, and they'll chew off the leg that has nursing home A that's liable to protect themselves. But so I got those allegations from Mark and Joel, and it was really fun to finally kind of, what does the verdict form look like? But so we just made it super simple. So we didn't want to do special interrogatories or anything that would create possible evidence of confusion on their part. We just wanted a straight, simple check the box if you think they're liable.
Yeah, we actually had Mark on here playing his harmonica recorder. So totally get it. And as Tad will speak to, we're familiar with those webs that the nursing homes do. So it's an incredible accomplishment just to get through that. And it's like, I don't know how you felt about it, Render, but it's like, okay, this is a major accomplishment. And then, oh, by the way, we have to keep moving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you get the case to trial. What is the one thing that you felt like was your biggest challenge during the trial?
So it's very clear what the biggest challenge was. And it was a weird way in which it came to light because as we've talked about, these guys had no insurance. So we're doing old fashioned collection effort against the property, against the track hoe, against all that stuff. That acreage is very valuable. So we think that we'll be able to get to it and collect 100% of the judgment. That's our plan. But because there was no insurance, there's no insurance defense lawyers. And they just paid their local lawyers, who are very capable, smart guys, to defend the case. They didn't take any depositions. So I'd never seen my client testify. I'd never seen the daughter testify, Victoria, or Sarah Grace, or the father-in-law, Mike Randall, or the riding coach, close friend, Spencer East. I'd never seen these guys testify. So, it's part of my thing lately about, do we take the experts' depositions for the defense, or are we just giving them a practice round and an audition for the insurance defense lawyers to decide whether they're going to put them on the stand? And lately, I've been of a mind that I am not doing that. I am not going to take those guys' depositions, because how nervous are those defense lawyers going to be putting an expert on the stand that they've never seen testify? Well, that's how I'm feeling about the family members.
Right.
Because I've never seen them testify. And I know that they are just in emotional turmoil over this. And we have a real culprit here that they know. It's not some stranger in a car. It is a guy that they knew and considered a friend that killed their dad and their husband. And so it's just a emotional powder keg. And I don't know what's going to happen on the stand. I don't know whether I'm going to call Debbie or whether I'm going to call Victoria. And I just met with them the week before, and Debbie was not out there. She doesn't know anything factually about what happened. So I just sat with Debbie for a couple of hours and had her tell me stories about Adam and what kind of guy he was and how they met. And she told the sweetest stories about this guy. And when we got done, I just said, that's our direct examination, Debbie. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to do it in a courtroom. We're going to talk to each other like that. We're going to chase rabbits. If a new story comes up about Adam that you want to tell, you go for it. You tell that story. And I think that gave her a lot of comfort that I wasn't scripting her. I didn't send her an outline I had no outline of the direct. I just trusted that she loved this man and she was going to tell some heartwarming stories about him, and she crushed it. I barely made it out of there without losing it. And she surprised us at the end. I thought we just had knocked it out of the park, that she had knocked it out of the park. And I thought, well, I'll just throw up the old softball. Is there anything else you think we need to know about Adam, for the jury to understand what kind of a person he was? And she says, well, I'd like to read you the last text message he ever sent me. And she reads this text message that he sent her about 2.5 hours before he was killed. And it is like the most beautiful Valentine's Day card you've ever read. And just like blew my mind. And I didn't know anything about it. And after she got finished reading it, I just said, are you kidding me? And I'm fighting off tears. I can hear the sniffles in the jury box. I can hear my co-counsel crying behind me. And she's like, no, I'm not kidding you. And that was how we ended her direct examination. And it was so sweet. And so I really felt like I was getting to know Adam, and feeling the loss. And then we had to call the 20-year-old daughter, Victoria, because she was out there when he was killed, and she shows up on the body cameras. So we needed to let the jury know that she didn't see anything and that we weren't trying to hide anything. So we got that out of the way real quick. And then we just had her tell a few stories. She's very delicate, very soft-spoken. But I put her on the stand and put her under oath. And I just said to her, everybody in this courtroom has a broken heart for you, Victoria. This is a safe place. Can we talk about your dad? And she said, yeah, okay. And I said, let's do the hard thing first. You were out there. Everybody's seen you on the body cams. Did you see it happen? You know how it happened? She says, I don't. I did not see it happen. I was not anywhere nearby. I said, okay, that's out of the way. Let's just talk about your dad. And she told these sweet stories about her dad, and they would go on road trips together to go to motocross events. She was a rider. She talked about him teaching her how to ride, and just told lovely stories about him. And again, no outline, similar prep, just met the week beforehand. And I told her the week beforehand, I said, you do not have to, because she came in and she was like, when they come in and you can see it, you can see the tension.
Yep.
She came in and she sat down at our conference table, and she brought a family member, kind of like a godmother, with her. And I just looked at Victoria and I said, you do not have to testify. It is okay. If you do not feel like it's something you can handle, I don't want to make this worse for you. It's your call. I want you to testify, but if you can't, it's totally okay. And so I just let her off the hook, and she decided. I didn't know until the night before whether she was going to come. I think I knew before I gave opening, because I wanted to be able to tell the jury that here are the witnesses you're going to meet. So I had her, she let me know the night before opening that she was going to testify. And then we had the father-in-law, who was such a sweetheart, and talked about the first time he met Adam and how he knew he was the right guy for his daughter first time he met him. So it was really very touching experience for me.
I'm curious, one of the most difficult things trying a wrongful death case, especially in a case where you have these horrific injuries, you have a widow who was this wonderful person who was not there. And really the first time when you're sitting there next to them in trial, that's the first time they get the full picture a lot of times about what happened. And they don't teach us in law school. I'm curious what your process is for preparing someone like that for what they're going to see in trial, because as much as we have to prepare for proving this case, I feel like it's our obligation to also prepare them for what they're going to see and to assist them through this process. I'm curious as to what you do.
That's a great question. We did, we were very, thankfully, very in tune with that. I've been in situations where I have said things to a jury in the presence of my client, and it ended up hurting my client. It was like I had a consortium claim one time for a widow, or not a widow, but a wife, and she was injured, and the husband had the consortium claim. And I said in closing argument, I said, she's not the wife she used to be. And after the trial was over, we got a good result. But after the trial was over, she repeated that back to me, sort of shaking her head and saying, I'm just not the wife I used to be. And I just have never forgiven myself for being so insensitive. And so going into this trial, we did a couple of things. One, we told Debbie that we were kicking her out of the courtroom every time we were talking about the incident or the injuries, the autopsy or the fractures of the skull. I said, the only thing you need to know is that he was killed instantly. He had no idea what hit him. He did not suffer a bit. So that's all you need to know. And I said to her, I said, Debbie, I'm going to kick you out of the courtroom when we do that kind of testimony. We're also going to seal all of the autopsy photos and the body photos from the scene. We're going to seal those in a sealed envelope, and they're going to be in evidence. And we'll tell the jury that all the body photos and the autopsy photos are in this envelope. We don't think you need to look at them. But it's your right to, if you think it's necessary. So we protected the jury from it. We didn't want to overplay that. And then we also told Debbie that she is 100% authorized to interrupt the trial and just say my name. Just say, Render. If we ever get into a category of stuff that is upsetting her, that's too close to what happened, she could just say my name, and I would ask the judge that she be excused. So we excused her at all those times. we had the witnesses on the stand had a notebook, a 3-wing binder with all the pictures in it. And we had to be super cautious because it was a very small courtroom. And as they flipped pictures over to get to the next picture, you would see, Adam in the ambulance. And so I would have to go up and sort of manually remind the witness, will you please hold the front flap up so that Debbie doesn't see these photos? So we tried to really take care of her in that regard.
Wow. This is an incredible story, incredible resilience from your clients to be able to go in there. And incredible trial lawyering. I'm just sitting here in amazement. We spend I don't know how many people have spent time watching this Heard Depp trial on TikTok, but this is true trial lawyering, Render. This is very honored to know you. I'm so glad that this family had you as their lawyer, and just incredible job, man. Incredible.
Thank
job.
you, Mike. Thank you. It was an honor. I felt, it is a strange thing to represent a dead person for a week and try to convey to the jury who that person was. You get like, you feel like this person, even though you don't. And so it was a real privilege to be a part of this case and to help this family grieve and to get justice for them. And I'm hoping that, they're still reeling, of course, but I'm hoping that long-term this will give them some peace.
If someone out there is listening and they want to get a hold of you, Render, what's the best way for them to do that? With a weird name like Render, it's not that hard. Yeah. But if you Google Render Freeman, you'll get two things. You'll get some links to my website, and then you'll also get some weird stuff about video editing. There's some process called render, the Freeman render that you do to a video. Render Freeman, which is my name means something. It means make the man free. And I am named for a captain, a naval captain who was shot down in Vietnam and was a POW MIA when I was born, Captain Render Creighton. So my family named me him. Wow. Named me after him, Render Creighton Freeman. So it's basically a prayer that he would be freed. And he was. He came back after 7.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And still alive. Lives in Phoenix, Arizona. I saw him a couple of months ago.
That's great.
That is incredible. Thank you for coming on, Render.
Thank you both very much. Good to see you guys.
You're listening to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. This is Mike Campbell.
There are guys and gals who walk the walk and Render's walk.
Absolutely. It's, I hear him telling the story, and it's, I think one of the hardest things to do as a trial lawyer is a wrongful death case, because I get so caught up in the person sitting next to you, not necessarily case, what the widow or the widower or the parent are going through. And so when I hear him talking about the trial, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm sitting here thinking about that widow in that case and what she had to go through, and what our obligations are as trial lawyers to help them through that process.
Yeah. When he was describing that, I'm thinking about just some of the cases we've had together, and trying to have a conversation with the family, and not only serving as a legal counsel, but in another role as just someone that they can unload on.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't teach you in law school how much you really are a counselor,
Counselor.
They really ought to have some classes in law school, just as much as they ought to be teaching QuickBooks for lawyers. And they don't teach that. They ought to be teaching psychology for, interpersonal client relations and, the grief and loss.
Yeah. I was talking with someone last week. getting her master's in social work. And I said, I gotta be honest with you, someday there's gonna be a niche in the legal profession for this type of work, because there's so much, I mean, there's so much grief, there's so much hurt. And sometimes as lawyers, we aren't equipped. We're just like, what can I do other than listen at this point in time? And sometimes that's all a client needs.
Yeah. But it's, watching a pro baseball game where you got a Hall of Fame pitcher and you're going in and you're like, there's a difference between this guy and the guy that's going to pitch 2 days from now that's fourth or fifth in the rotation.
Yeah.
You see a guy like Render talking about how he tries cases and the things that he does with his witnesses and with his openings and, jury selection and things like that. And it's the difference between watching, the number one guy on the staff and the number 5 guy on the staff. And it's just always impressive to watch guys like that do their.
And it totally. And one of the things it does for me is it provides permission, like a permission structure to say, I can talk with my client like a normal human being when they're on the stand. I can say things like, this is going to be very difficult, and because in your law school mind, when you come out, you're like, this is formalized. You're not supposed to do that. All of this could be objectionable. It's like,
right.
You got to dismiss that and realize we're just all people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And the jury wants to see somebody that actually has a heart and somebody that actually cares too. So
that's exactly right. Well, I appreciate you joining us for this podcast, and
thanks for having me on.
Can't wait to have you on to talk about not the trial, but all the extracurricular activities around the last trial that you had. So.
We need to do a podcast where we just have a serial bunch of lawyers come in to talk about the craziest things that have happened to them in a courtroom. And we'll just do like 5-minute takes for each one. I think it's going to be a hit.
Let's do it.
All right.
Perfect.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, Dad.
That concludes another episode of Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. Thank you for listening, and we truly hope it was worth your time. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content that Lawyer Minds has to offer, and engage with us on social media. Your feedback and ideas are always welcomed. See you next time.